sounds like a stupid question.
Probably is, because, yeah, go ahead. Skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for.
When you close off that feedback channel, you are not going to be able to hear the truth.
In the first microseconds, your brain can't tell the difference between physical danger and what we call social danger.
I'm pissed off at you.
Me, specifically?
Well, just because you're my boss and all.
Employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. Go forward and don't suck. Hey, all, welcome to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. I am back again. This is Michael Nash without Ethan one more time for this quick series that I am working on here with Hana Butler. Hana's back again. We are taking a couple episodes to kind of just briefly get into the concept of managing in a hybrid work environment. There's been so many people asking us to come in and work with them on that. And we've even had a couple people ask us to do one-on-one coaching based solely on how do I manage in the hybrid work environment. It's a challenge. It's a shift in our society that is not going away. So this is really timely, but it's also probably going to be super relevant on into the future, right? So we're just diving in, Hana. Is that all right? Just jump right back in.
Jump back in.
Yeah. So would you, it's been a week, just super high level, some of the kind of the conceptual or contextual points that we touched on last episode so we can kind of catch our listeners up again.
Right. So we are talking about managing and leading today in a hybrid world, or especially as a manager and leader, when you have people now working in a physical office space and also at home. And a cool little fact that I didn't throw out last time, but just to highlight that we're really seeing about 1/3 of people are just dying to be back in the office. Guarantee they're going to be probably all of our promoters. If you remember back to behavioral styles, these are the people who just really love being in person, or they may not have a house, home life that is very conducive to focus and working. Then you have a whole other third of folks who absolutely do not ever want to come back to the office ever again and find that they are working much better at home. And then there's another third of people that said, hey, I kind of want a mix of both. So it's really important that we just acknowledge that we have this split happening from our experience. And as organizations, as leaders, managers, we do need to acknowledge this and moving forward. And if we try to make everybody do one or the other, we're really going to see a loss in productivity and all that cool stuff that came with it. Kind of, again, trying to get it to these big concepts here. I mentioned last time about the Neuro Leadership Institute's model called SCARF. And these are the 5 social domains in the brain that are always checking out, does something feel safe or does something feel like a threat? And we are constantly in a state of moving away from something that feels like a threat or moving towards something that feels like a reward. And when 2020 hit and we all immediately had to go into this work from home state without a sense of choice or autonomy, it did put us all into a threat state. And yet what we've seen emerge in the data is that most employees, and again, not everyone here, we can't say, there's been lots of circumstance, but a lot of people actually felt an unexpected reward of autonomy, because now I had a little more sense of control over my environment, my time, and the way that I did my work. And we saw huge spikes in innovation, creativity, but especially around productivity. And when people were given just a little bit of choice around how to decorate their cubicle, for example, in this one study, they saw productivity go up by 25%. So this is a really important finding for us to, as we move forward, to recognize that if we try to make everybody do something, like go back to the office or everybody work remotely again, we're gonna create a sense of threat in their brains. So we wanna, as we're moving forward, we wanna build off of this reward network that's been established through autonomy.
I resonate with everything you just said. Here's the problem, of course, is that there are organizations that there's not choice. I mean, it just is what it is. And so, and we're going to be getting into this today, I think, but I guess the goal then would be to find different opportunities to provide autonomy.
Yeah, and this is, again, we're coming back to, this is one of the main findings that we're building off of here, is how do we solve for autonomy in whatever organizational structure or actual work that you have, while also managing for fairness. I really think that that's a great umbrella statement, again, derived from the research of Neuro Leadership Institute, that's going to help guide us forward as we look at how to manage in a hybrid workplace.
Good. All right. Well, that's a great intro and a little bit of a teaser, because we are going to be talking about autonomy. In fact, today we're going to talk about autonomy. We're going to talk about also meetings, and maybe a little bit about just helping people stay connected with one another. But at the end of our episode, we talked a little bit about some practical options for managers and teams in terms of managers and employees staying connected, right? We talked about how in the world of the hybrid workplace, there's not the same opportunities for, managing by walking around and running into the employee in the cafeteria, or let's walk to the meeting together and catch up. And, you just don't have that as much, or it's not as evenly distributed. So we had three just tips for managers on this one. We talked about the open door policy. We talked about one-on-ones. And we talked about check-ins. I just encourage our listeners, if you missed that piece, just to go back and catch that. We talked about some things that managers can do to be much more intentional about each of those three things, so they aren't just as needed or random or if it works out, but they really are plugged in, right? So listeners can go back and catch that. And then the other thing is just a conceptual thing. I think you said I forget how you worded it, Hana, but we can't suck at being managers. I mean, we need to turn our management skills up to 11 at this point. And why is that? Tell us again, why is it so important right now that managers are skilled?
Oh, that's such a great question. And there's so much to that, but we just really do need to bring those skills up to 11 in terms of how we manage our folks in a hybrid situation, so that they can feel like they have choice. So that sense of autonomy, a sense of relatedness, right? A sense of belonging to the group. We have to really establish our culture through the everyday habits and behaviors that we're modeling in our meetings on Zoom. And here's the good news is I can see you, right? Like I can hear you, I can see you. We can still really do these things working through a remote platform rather than just needing to be in person. So yeah, just all the things about being intentional and explicit, and so that people can be very clear on what is required of them. So there's a mindset shift that we've named it, turning from surveillance mindset to outcomes or growth mindset. So not just butts and chairs anymore, but actually what are we working towards together, and how do I actually empower my people to be their best selves? This is no longer just a clock in, clock out, do your job, get your paycheck. It's actually great work is what we're trying for.
Yeah, and I kind of hope that would be our mindset anyways, before the whole hybrid work environment, but not every manager has been there, right? It's a little easier, I think, in the environment where we're all together to maybe phone it in a little bit more. I mean that not literally, right? To just kind of show up as a manager and, sort of the attitude, hey, I'll be available if you need me, as opposed to, and here's something we've said a lot in this podcast and in our workshops, those 15 management skills that we preach all the time, they're deliverables. In the hybrid environment, delivering those 15 management skills has to be more intentional, is the bottom line. So let's move into a couple things today. We started to talk just now, in fact, a little bit more about autonomy. Let's talk a little bit more about that and get to what are some things that a manager can do to manage for both autonomy and fairness, as you said.
Yeah, so just a quick definition of autonomy here is just a sense of control over one's environment or choices. And highlighting again, I mentioned the SCARF model, but I don't know if I said them again. So status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And all 5 of these domains are, like I said, on a hair trigger all the time in our brains. And for most of us, if you're a human being in the last 2 years, you have been experiencing very high levels of uncertainty, ambiguity around our environment and our choices, our workplaces. So when our brains feel a pretty severe and especially long-term sense of threat to certainty, it's really going to highlight some of these other networks and make us more sensitive to them, especially fairness. If you've noticed lately that adulting has kind of gone out the window, because I look around and I see a lot of us wanting to throw these temper tantrums like my 2-year-old would, that this is unfair. And I just want to give a little bit of grace here, and that this is very normal in terms of we've just had a lot of threat to our sense of certainty. And so then we're clinging to an idea of fair or unfair transactions. So how do I mitigate that or moderate that is by providing some kind of autonomy. And that just means what kind of choice can I actually give this person, whether it's about their time, about their schedule during the day, or is it about how they go about doing this project? What resources do they use? And again, like you said, Mike, there's going to be those of us who have the option of working in different physical locations. Like some of us can work at home, some of us can be in the office. We have a choice. That's a huge reward to the Autonomy Network. And yet there's going to be the rest of us who are essential workers or in the service industry and do not have that choice of where we work. So for really good managers and leaders, they're going to be asking themselves, what kind of choices can I give these folks? You know, how can we, again, solve for autonomy by presenting any kind of flexibility and offering them a choice? So we're talking a huge spectrum here of choices, right? Of like from your daily schedule to how you do your jobs, where we have our meetings, what platform we're using as a team, all the way to like, what kind of reward would you like in terms of monetarily or as a gift?
Yeah, let's stay on that. Let's talk about all sorts of options for autonomy, but then let's go back to those folks that are not present at work. And what are some creative schedule related expectations? Can we loosen up a little bit? Can we lighten up? Can we adjust our boundaries a bit? But back to the workplace or just general, you mentioned rewards, you mentioned meetings, even having employees work together to create schedules, improving customer service, figuring out next steps for a project, right? It's really something we've asked managers to do anyway, but really doubling down on understanding that this is the time to give our employees choice and a chance to use their own creativity, right?
Yeah, and this has, again, probably been on most of our radars, but we're, again, that word intentional, I'm just going to throw back in there. Right. We just really need to be making these very explicit. And I also just really encourage our organizations or our managers to communicate that this is a priority. And if you can communicate that and then back it up through action by asking for feedback, that's, again, one fabulous way to give people a sense of control over their environment is when I go and actually ask them for feedback. Cool data research on this. We love feedback. It's an incredible skill. It's one of our 15 best practice management skills. It is hands down one of the foundational things to shifting a culture, to feeling safe, right, to having trust. And what we see is that when there is no way to reduce defensiveness in our brains, in terms of if Mike says he's got feedback for me, it's going to trigger me, no matter if I'm the Buddha, like it's still going to do that. But what happens is the crazy thing is when we turn feedback around as something we go and get, it actually reduces that defensiveness in both the giver and the receiver by 50%. So really encouraging this shift around thinking as of feedback as a
necessary evil.
A necessary evil or an evaluation or this thing I'm going to get and it's scary, to a matter of perspective getting. Like I actually really value and I can feel safe asking for your perspective. That's just changing the word feedback, by the way, to feel safer. So going to get feedback is a great way to empower a sense of autonomy.
Yeah, that's really good.
And also, of course, you're getting benefits to all those other SCARF networks. So
yeah.
that's a main one. We've already just mentioned if you have that ability to embrace this hybrid work project and really let your people know that you don't have it figured out yet, right? Like this is new. If you are a company that this is new, by the way, of course, some people have been doing this for a long time, and say, hey, this is what we're going to try. Like we really want to give people the option to either work fully remotely, work fully at the office, if you have that real estate option, or that we're going to do hybrid. And here's what we're going to try. And here's how we're going to get feedback from you.
That's so good. I worked with a client recently, and the choice that was given to the employees was, we need everyone here these 3 days. And on these 2 days, you don't have to be here except for these people. And so it was very mandated. It was created from way up high. It was announced. Everybody had to fit within this. My advice is undo that and let's start over and let's get everyone together and give them what the needs are, right? Give them what the bottom line is, right? What's the end result we're looking for? Let's give them that. Let them get together. And I think they're using a couple different committees first to sort of draft this idea, then they're going to bring it back to everybody. But the idea is the employees get to sit down and say, look, how are we going to make this work, right? And I think that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, and it fits in with this other really helpful tool, which is identify the priority. So it goes priority, then habits, and then systems. And when we can establish what those priorities again are, the outcomes that we're actually looking for, then we determine what are the habits that are going to help us get there. Then we establish the systems to keep us accountable, to help that be sustainable and even regenerative. That's going to be the most successful versus kind of a lot of companies switch it around. Here's the system, here's what we're going to do, and making it a mandate versus a movement. One other little side note here is sometimes people can say, oh, Mike just wants to work from home because he wants to hang out with his dog, drink beer, and be lazy.
How did you know that's what I do all day?
And again, our research is showing from these huge intakes that are going on, especially after the Great Resignation, right? We've lost so many people from the workforce. So we've had a pretty amazing pool to get info from. And just a reminder that most human beings actually really want to do good work. Actually, they want to do great work. And they have gotten this sense of them doing great work when they've had this autonomy at a workplace that serves that.
This dovetails, Hana, right into that topic of accountability, right? It's the same topic. 2 years ago, when this first started, that was one of the first things managers were asking me. Okay, well, how do I hold people accountable now if they're home? Yeah. And what do I hold them accountable to, right? And in many cases, maybe most, I don't know, I think there's a way to figure out what great looks like, right? What's the end result? Right. And provide some parameters and whatever you need to provide, right? Some expectations, and then let go a little bit, right? And trust, and sure, have check-ins, but we're now having to manage much more toward results as opposed to managing the process, right?
Yes, I love that. And we're here for people. I think that's a little bit of a shift for maybe some folks. And what we're asking a lot of the managers and leaders we're coaching is to use that word coach, like actually, are you here for your people? Like you are a people manager. You are here to help coach and develop another human being so that they can be their best self, not so that they turn in their work to make you look good. Again, there's this kind of shift that's happening in the mindset from just surveillance or checking the boxes or the details that they've turned in this on this time. And actually, some companies were even doing literal surveillance, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, we saw people super tighten down on, I'm looking at your emails, I'm actually watching you via your camera just because I need to make sure that you are doing it. It's because people were freaked out, right? So when we felt this lack of certainty, we tried to cling to even more sense of control. Yeah. And we immediately saw that didn't work. Now we're entering into this phase of innovation and creativity around how do we do this, and really making it explicit to people about what the expectations are for their work to be great, and then letting them do it with those check-ins and the support, the praise and recognition, all of those things we know work. Yeah, so here's a really practical, I mean, this is like maybe so practical, I don't even need to say this, but so we are advising our managers, you need to sit down with your employee, and this might be weekly. In some cases, this might be a few minutes each day. Let's sit down together and figure out, all right, so employee Hana, what do you hope to have accomplished by end of day Friday? What do you need from me? Here's what I hope you will work on or have accomplished. There might even need to be some, we'll put quotes around the word negotiation involved, right? What does great look like this week? What does great look like today? What does great look like this month? Again, it depends. But I just really like to see managers and employees having these productivity plans figured out ahead of time
And now, hopefully, you don't have to manage them through that plan, right? You've set the expectations, you've worked on those together. You can have a check-in if necessary or not. You can get together at the end of the week or the beginning of next week and check on progress, do some course corrections, right? But that to me is more about managing toward autonomy than micromanaging. So, I mean, that's a really practical thing, and it can fit right in with the check-ins we talked about at the last episode, but managing for the end result as opposed to the process.
This is a shift. If we've been taught to manage or lead that way. And It's more about, I love the word negotiation, conversation, right? It's that you are there holding the container of that big picture and the outcomes that we're working towards, but it's still a conversation.
Yep.
And the more we make it a conversation, then the more we're going to light off those little reward networks in the brain that encourage people to keep doing it because it feels good.
So you said something a few minutes ago that's so good. I think that vast majority of people, if managed well, really want to do a good job, and they're going to be their worst critics, and they're going to hold themselves accountable, and they're going to rise to the occasion, right? They're going to enjoy this autonomy. They're going to enjoy the way they're being managed, and they're going to step up, right? Would you agree?
Vast majority, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then you're going to have people who don't. We're not implying that we put all this autonomy out there and everyone's going to rise to the occasion, because we know that's not going to happen.
No, and it's actually pointing us even more in this direction of what I was saying, is rethinking ourselves as coaches in terms of management and leadership. It's what we spend entire day 3 of our training, if not more, on what are the actual skills of being a good coach. Again, and when we're developing humans to be their best selves. And so there are a lot of tips, tricks, and tools and skill sets. Again, that's why we're asking our managers to step up those skills to 11, because it takes a pretty good tool set to be a coach rather than just someone who's managing a process for a product.
Yeah.
Because our products now are humans.
Yep.
And they are, as we know, not little assembly kits that go together and turn out the same way every time. So we really have to be thinking and moving on our feet and utilizing all these different skills in order to meet our people where they're at and help them be their best selves.
That's so good. So Hana, you're my employer, and suddenly I am home, and I have been working for you right outside your office for 12 years. And that's what you're used to, and that's what I'm used to. Now I'm home, and not only am I home, but my kids are home a lot. I'm struggling right now with the fact that you've been annoyed with me because there were a lot of times in the last few weeks where I haven't answered my phone because I had to run a kid somewhere or I had to take care of something else, right? Whereas before you could have just poked your head out your door and asked me the thing, right? How do you manage the situation?
Yeah, great question. So pertinent, at least to my life right now. Again, number one thing, I'm going to go to the manager. I'm going to ask them to really look at their mindset and their shift around going from surveillance to outcome. Have I been clear? Am I clear? What am I asking for from this person? What outcomes are they hitting and what are they not? And then knowing that that's my job to communicate that in feedback. From the employee, then same thing. We're got to have these discussions around how do we communicate best? And that, my life is happening and I do need a little grace for that in order to be my best self. And again, if you're a manager listening to this and you've had this situation, as a mom of 2 little kids currently at home doing that, it's know that these people, like you said, Mike, are their worst critic. These people are probably already feeling guilty, probably already feeling stressed and overwhelmed because they're not doing what they used to be doing. And so giving people some grace, giving that empathy, and then being really clear. Hey, what do you need from me? What can I help you be more clear about? Where are we fuzzy on how we're communicating? I've been calling and you're not answering. Well, you know what, Mike? I got 2 screaming kids around here. Talking on the phone doesn't work very well for me. Can we do text message? Or I'm going to send you an email and it's going to come at 10 o'clock at night. That's because that's the only time I have quiet time. But I'm still getting my work done. But it's just giving me that space to know that the timing is going to probably look a little different.
Yeah, that's so good. And here's the thing, when you notice that this tension is arising, right? There's been some of these conversations, there's been some of this frustration, or better yet, do this proactively. I recommend that managers who are managing someone who's home, that they have, this goes right back to check-ins, right? Let's chat on Monday morning and let's look at our week. Okay, so this is what's going on for you this week. This is what's going on for me this week. And of course, things happen. There's the unexpected. I want to make room for the grace that you just mentioned, right? But I think the more proactive we can be open and actually seek these conversations out, because now I'm actually proactively giving you the message that I understand, right? And that you do have a life and that you are home and that real life kicks in here and gets involved with your work life. And so let's just sort of, again, negotiate. And I mean that in the kindest of ways, right? Negotiate through our day or our week and figure out what's going to work. And now we have some parameters.
And one invitation on this, again, data speaking to the brain, is that remembering when we are managers and leaders, we have power, right, over these people. We call it the power differential. And when an adult senses that someone else has power over us, we're going to do whatever we need to do to feel safe. One of the things that I've noticed myself and other people doing in regards to communicating with our boss is that we tend to hide things, right? Or maybe we're not as explicit around, I want to go do a yoga class at 10, so I'm just going to, not answer my phone.
Right.
And here's what's really cool is that when you, Mike, volunteer or show me through your own behaviors and your own words that that's a priority, my self-care, our well-being matters to you, and that is a priority, and here are the habits. You say, hey guys, I am for Wednesday, I'm going to be out from 9 until 11 because I'm going to go do my bike ride. And you make it explicit, you let us know. It actually, again, hits all those parts of our brains around a sense of status. Like you've actually lowered your status, right? Saying, hey, I'm just like you guys. I need this too. Hey, make sure you're giving yourself enough time during your days, during your weeks, that you can still take care of yourselves and your space.
Yeah, I love that. This whole conversation just needs to be had just proactively. Talk about self-care, talk about schedules, talk about the new expectations. Again, assuming people they want to do their best. They want to bring their best self every day. And the context has changed now. So let's change along with it. This is fantastic. Yeah. So we need to move forward. I know there's more, but we're trying to kind of split the podcast today. Abrupt, right? Bam, let's change gears here and talk about meetings. As practical as we can now, let's talk about ways, techniques, even some of the code of conduct stuff that we want to instill in our leaders. How do you run really good meetings in a hybrid work environment? And actually, one of the things that Hana and I both, as well as our colleagues, when we're working with teams, we have kind of a thing about the whole hybrid meeting thing. We're not fans. Would you agree with that, Hana? We're not fans. We're not fans of some people are on Zoom and other people are present physically. And why are we not fans of that?
Yeah. So in our brains, we also have these things called biases. And one of our favorite biases is this thing called distance bias. Again, we are wired to connect with another human being right there. If you ever notice this, if we have all of these mirror neurons and other stuff going on in our brain. If I'm sitting next to you, I might actually start breathing at the same time you're breathing, even though I'm very attuned and I'm aware that, I need to be paying attention to the speaker on the screen, or that there's these other people that are on a platform and I'm in the office with Mike. I am just naturally going to probably lean over and be like, pss, pss, pss. We just do this. We are getting so much information non-verbally by being in the same space. It really does influence the sense of equity or fairness for the people who are not in the room. So we definitely encourage, if you can, is one virtual or all virtual, meaning even if you have people in the office, everyone is on their own personal platform, preferably in a room, not all together, because you get weird feedback if you try to do that. So our biggest win would be everyone on the platform virtually or everyone all together.
Yeah, pause there. So even in our trainings, we actually insist, right? So if we've been asked to come in and work with 25 people and they want to have some people present in the room with us and other people, quote, calling in, we tend to ask them not to do that. Let's get everyone together physically if you possibly can. If you can't, let's send everybody home and ask everyone to get comfortable or maybe at work in their office or someplace that's private and get everyone on the same platform. There's going to be exceptions, and there has been for ages, right? I can't tell you how many times I've done a training and there's those 3 people from Chicago who aren't going to fly in and they're going to be, they're going to be on computers. So, second best is if there's any chance you could just have just top-notch AV set up, if you can have it so that those folks are on a big screen and they can see the group and the group can see them and the leader can see them. I mean, if you can't get everyone together or everyone separate, let's hopefully invest in some really high-tech stuff so that we can actually have a sense of being together. It's going to be easier for me to lead the meeting, and it's going to be easier for them to participate when everybody can see everyone. The absolute worst case, Hana, have you ever done this? Have you done a training where everyone's sitting around the table, but there's a little black box in the middle of the room?
Speakerphone.
Oh,
or an iPhone with somebody on it. Yeah.
Oh, the speakerphone with, I don't even remember how many people are on the speakerphone, and so worst case, right? And I'm not saying if you have to do it, you have to do it, but please don't. Now, if you have to do it, put some little name tags around the speakerphone, right? Put all 4 names there, so at least you can see that those people are there. And then let's facilitate so that those people really get their space, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that. How can I, if I have to facilitate a meeting with some people that aren't in the room, whether they're on a speakerphone or up on the wall, right? What are some things I can do to facilitate their involvement?
Yeah, so like you said, putting people's names on a board or post it so that, again, I have a visual of that person. If you want to get silly or funny, you could have little emojis that represent the person. I don't, whatever you can do to make it visual that this person has a seat at the table.
You could have their colleagues draw their face. That'd be hilarious. Actually.
I think you could actually have some fun with that. Another thing is just, again, making these things explicit. Name it at the beginning. Hey, folks, we're doing this. This is hybrid. We do have some folks joining us. I'm going to ask those of you present in the room to really do your best to moderate, mitigate those little side conversations that happen. And we're going to be working towards as inclusive as we can. When I do ask a question, if I'm facilitating the meeting, and in a way that helps mitigate that is that I ask the people who are remote to give their answers first. So it's communicating that, we're equaling the playing field. I'm inviting their voices first. It also conveys to those people that they matter, that they're there. Because a lot of times people who are on that little black box or remote tend to feel disconnected. So we bring them in.
Yeah, I love that. And as a slight modification of that, if you don't go to them first, because sometimes going to them first every single time can start to put them feeling a little bit on the spot, right? So what I would say is often go first with them, but if you don't go first, carve out some time for them, right? So you've asked the question and lots of people have answered. It's unlikely that they're going to just jump in verbally because of the, because of the barriers. So, okay, hold on a second. Hey, you folks that aren't in the room, right? Your turn.
If you're using a platform like Zoom or Teams and all the other ones, you also know that we have these really cool chat functions.
Yep.
So if they are not participating verbally, great way to encourage the same kind of side chatter that can happen with the people in person is just have someone in the room, kind of like a secretary who's watching that chat box or who's able to follow the commentary coming in with nonverbal questions. So just utilizing all of our resources as a way to have everyone feeling engaged, whether they're in person or remote.
Yeah, that's good.
We've said this over and over and over again, and it's probably like a broken record now, but I'm going to talk about it, is use your cameras. We, again, are wired for connection. If this is a meeting with my colleagues, if this is a training, I don't care who it's with, but turn on your videos because it's really important for us to get all those cues, for us to be able to create a sense of connection, to see how you are.
Yeah, this might be a tiny bit controversial, but I'm going to double down on this. I'm on a board and in a board meeting a couple nights ago, and there was 2 members that just would not, even with the subtle ask, they didn't want to turn their cameras on. It was weird because I'm so used to not allowing that. It was so awkward to have people just not present. If it is physically possible to be present visually, you have to be. I've had some interesting conversation with managers who feel like it's not their right. They don't really have a right to ask that. And I actually disagree with that strongly. I don't really understand it. You wouldn't allow someone at work to stand outside the door and listen in, right? So, the idea of being fully present and let's take it one more step. Maybe you were going to go there, but as present as you would be if you were physically in the room, which means what you're not doing is bringing your other work with you. You're not typing on your computer while you're on the computer in the meeting. By the way, I can tell when you're doing it. You're not checking your phone. I mean, there really does have to be this expectation that if we want to have awesome meetings, which I think you can have, you really can, we're all going to have our skin in the game.
And it's part of stepping those skills up to 11 is knowing that that is part of your job is facilitating, right? And remembering that meetings are a microcosm of our culture.
Yes.
And that we can intentionally engineer our culture by the way we intentionally engineer our meetings. And so when a manager tends to avoid that ask or making that a best practice, remember what we allow, we teach. You're saying it's okay to not be accountable. It's okay to not be fully present in our work.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be distracted. I mean, whatever the story. Now with that, okay, there is this thing, it is for real. Zoom fatigue, Teams fatigue, I don't care, video, like we are also not used to having to see our own face. Think about before 2020, how often did you actually see your face? I mean, for those of you who are vain like Mike, and you sit there and stare
while
at
I'm drinking my beer and playing with my dog.
Stare at yourself in the mirror, but it can be.
Did you see that study that showed what people are doing?
Oh, when they're looking at their faces?
They're looking at themselves more than they're looking at everyone else. There was a study on this recently.
It is, and I do it all the time. So there is a trick. You can hide self-view on, especially Zoom. It's a platform we use most often. So you can literally just hide your self-view because that will reduce that cognitive load and exhaustion by a huge amount. Because we're like little kids. We're just intrigued by, oh my God, that's my face. Hide self-view is a way to make it so that you can actually engage with the other people. Do make it okay to take a break. Like,
oh yeah,
just take a quick break, and you can even type it in the chat like, hey, I just need to close. I need to shut my eyes for a minute, or look outside, or I'm going to go get a glass of water. I mean, we would do it even in large group meetings, even in present, right? Sometimes we take little breaks. So it's okay to turn off your camera for a few seconds, but we're just going to make sure we turn it back on.
Yeah, in fact, let's say that at the beginning of the meeting. Like I say that in most of my trainings. I say, we go through these expectations and we get everybody with their skin in the game, but then we go right back to grace, right? Hey, look, everybody, it's going to be a long half day or whatever it is. Take your own breaks if you need them. I promise I'll be giving you breaks. But if you need your own bio break or whatever break you need, turning off your camera is a sign that you're stepping away for whatever reason. And no, you don't have to tell me why. Just step away by turning off your camera, and I will trust, and we will trust that you'll be back. Side note, people don't have cameras. People don't have the technology. Let's not problem solve it other than this is perfect world, but organization, you've sent people home. And remember, the workplace is the great equalizer, right? We all come to work and we have our space and we have our equipment and we have everything we need, but you go home. And I literally did a training a year ago, 7-hour training. And this poor guy had to sit in his car on his iPhone and do the training right there, right? Not everybody has the space, the house that's adequate for this, the equipment, right? You can't always mitigate that as an employer, but when you can, you should, right? That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, we're going to just go into, these are tools for your tool belt here. In this hybrid remote working world, also going to acknowledge again, I said the Zoom fatigue thing. Research is showing and really emerging that our best practices for meeting length are getting shorter and shorter. In terms of if we can, and again, this is going to be very dependent on what meetings you are. So we've talked about 3 different kinds of meetings here, right? We're talking about your weekly check-ins, we're talked about one-on-ones, and we talked about group meetings. For weekly check-ins, like, maybe these are only 15 to 25 minutes, but let's keep them to a relatively shorter amount of time so that we're going to actually let these people get their work done.
I've seen some really successful 5-minute check-ins.
5-minute check. Yeah. Again, these really can be very efficient, especially those check-in, those kind of weekly check-in kind of things. Larger group meetings, we're really going to encourage people to keep it 50 to 55 minutes. This is also going to depend on your regularity. So like in our team, we meet for an hour and a half, but that's because we meet every other week. Take this and morph it for you, but just know that shorter, the better. And remember the passing period thing. I was talking with a friend who works completely dispersed, constant meetings all day long. And so they are really working to put to use some of this data around how can we make this better. So let's make sure we give people 5 to 10 minutes. So we end our meetings 10 minutes before the hour, and we start our meetings 5 minutes after the hour. This is, again, just going to try to allow for some space so there's not these back-to-back meetings for an entire day. Another thing is we're seeing helpful is minimal meeting Mondays or Fridays. So as an organization, we do make this a best practice that we are not going to schedule meetings for the entire first half of the Monday. Because when people come to work on Mondays, their brains tend to be in that kind of fresh thinking mode, ready to just sit down, get into it. Or maybe it's the second half of Friday. But somehow, some way we make it this explicit thing that everyone's going to do their best to not have any meetings, which will allow for other time, whether it's deep thinking, reflection time, or or connection, right? Maybe it's time to circle back. Hey, Mike, I wanted to follow up with you about something. We had this on Wednesday and this was my time because we don't have meetings. So these kind of minimal meeting days that allow for other kinds of work.
I love it. It's great. Here's another one. When you're first starting, or maybe it's time to stop and rethink and regroup, but you've got this group you're going to be meeting with on a regular basis. Let's have a meeting about meetings. Let's take our first meeting, or at least a big chunk of it, and say, and here's what I would do. And I've done this a bunch of times. I'd say, look, I'm going to put you in small groups so the processors can process and everyone can have a chance to participate. Ask them a question. Well, here's a great question. What can we all do? And I mean, participants and me as a facilitator. What can we all do going forward to make these remote meetings effective, productive, and enjoyable, right? So you put everyone in their small groups, ask them that question, give them, 8 minutes, come back together, make a list, walk through the list together, make your choices. And you know what they're going to come up with? They're going to come up with everything I would want them to come up with, right? They're going to come up with not doing other work and leaving your phone off or whatever. They're going to come up with breaks. They're going to come up with being on camera. But the cool thing is they design this, right? They, again, it's back to autonomy. They get to create these norms, these expectations together, and then you codify them, right? Once they're being created, this is important, write them down, review them a couple times going forward. Maybe after a quarter, after 4 months or so, even check in with that list again, see how we're doing, right? It becomes our code of conduct, but it was created by the group.
Yeah, and what a great way to get that ownership and buy-in. And it's there, right? It's accountability again, right? We said we were going to do this, and we can point that out. And
Yep.
And also, yay for successes, right? Say, hey, we're really doing a good job at this.
Yes.
Some of this seems really, again, it's not rocket science, but we're just going to put it out there. If we're working in hybrid or remote, and just the difficulties of our times, people need check-ins. There are certain behavioral styles, conductors, that tend to want to just get right to it. We don't have much time, so we have this full agenda, so we just need to get right into it. We are missing an incredible opportunity to build culture, to create this sense of relatedness and belonging that every human being really needs in order to bring their best selves. And I am not talking about silly, goofy icebreakers where you make people balance something on their nose. It literally could be a 2-word check-in. Brene Brown and her entire organization, that's what they do. Every meeting is just 2 words. And here's
like give me an example of a 2-word check-in.
So I say, hey, Hana, how are you doing today? Sunny, quiet. Those are my 2 words for right now. And that's it. And then we move to the next person. And even if I have 20 people in my meeting, that's pretty quick. But here's the cool thing is that those little words, or if Mike, you said, I'm distracted, anxious, I might actually say, hey, Mike, can I follow up with you about that? You said you're feeling really distracted and anxious. I just want to know what's going on.
This would be something you would ask that afterwards, or?
Yeah, so this opportunity to circle back based off of the information that was given to me in those meetings, whether I am a peer or especially if you're a manager or leader, this stuff is gold, right? I am listening, I am paying attention, and whatever's coming out in those 2-word check-ins are going to be really valuable for me to utilize in in my check-in with that individual.
The reason we're doing this, especially in this world right now, is about connection, right? We're talking about, because we don't have anywhere near the opportunities that we've had in the past when we're all together. So these are quick opportunities for connection. I think if these are done well, I think they are very, very valuable. Doing them well, though, here's a couple thoughts. I like to give people, depending on the question, a little bit of quiet time first. And sometimes it's just a minute, because otherwise we start and I'm trying to think of what I'm going to say, and I'm not listening to you, right? So that's just a quick word for processors. Well, for anybody, right? Take a minute to think about what you're going to come up with, what you're going to say. One of mine recent ones was, I know you really have no place in the world you'd rather be but here at this meeting, but if you had to be someplace in the world for a week and you had no issues with money, you had all the money in the world, where would you go and why? Give people a minute, right? Because they're going to be thinking of all their great things while the other people are talking.
Yeah, and we could go on forever about this, because some people don't want to share things outside of their work.
Sure.
And you as the manager or leader, you know your group,
Mm-hmm.
the goal is for you to know your group. And so you can have the invitation, and you can always challenge by choice, right? I mean, people don't have to say it. Like, this is just an invitation. There's no pressure.
Yep.
And also, again, reminder to use the chat. If there are a lot of people and you don't want to do the whole trying to figure out who's going next, and either pick people, go around and say their names, or invite people to use the chat. And that also speeds it up a bit. So if you're short on time.
Let's talk about that in a bigger context. Some more tips and stuff. Let's say I have a group of people, there's 8 of us, and we've been working together for a while. I'm going to push the envelope in some ways. For example, I'm going to have times where I might even say, unless you have a lot of noise going on in the background, let's stay unmuted, so we can just be present, right? So we can speak up, right? That's something I might try. I might say, hey, for this next period of time, don't use chat, right? I'm going to facilitate in a way that leaves space and leave opening. And, if we were sitting around the conference table at work, you're probably not going to write things on a piece of paper and hold them up. You're going to just participate, right? So again, I think this is all about knowing your group and creating psychological safety, chunk by chunk, right? Bit by bit, as opposed to throwing everyone in the deep end all at once.
And you can even give a little boost to certainty here, and just letting people know explicitly, you're here for a reason. You matter, you're part of this team, and I really value what you have to say. So I'm going to ask you these questions, and I really need everyone to participate. It's, again, explicit, naming the value, giving people the sense of certainty that they are supposed to be here at this meeting, that you're paying attention, and that their input is valued. Some other kind of, again, meeting type of things, because we are in more of a technological world here. Also, I'm going to give a shout out to agendas and getting your stuff out ahead of time. So promoters, this is for you. Those of us who tend to procrastinate, if you know you have your weekly meeting, let's make sure what's your best practice, right? Is getting the agenda out 24 hours enough? Or is this an agenda that people can add things to or not? So, if it's something people can add things to, or you're looking for input on, you're going to want to at least give people a couple days. If this is a set agenda that you're the one creating, great. Like, again, try to get it out within 24 hours so people have time to review. If there's any information that is associated with the agenda, make sure it's included, right? Send it out. And then also, again, hey, you need to read this, right? Like, this is part of your job, to read this and come prepared to have discussion.
And I like to have people have their agenda available during the meeting, right? So if it's on your screen buried 5 windows back, you're probably not going to use it. Can it be on a separate device? Can it be a hard copy? But having your agenda available for everyone, because that way we can all help stay on track. Sometimes I even like having the facilitator put the agenda up on the shared screen for the first couple minutes of the meeting, just so it's right there. Everybody gets to see it again.
Yeah, and if you are using an agenda to go through, and also if you're taking notes, have the notes right there on the screen, and that way everybody can see them and it's a shared document. So again, probably stuff people are already doing, but sometimes it can be good as a reminder. Use technology to your advantage, not to your disadvantage. Yep. So getting things out ahead of time, using the shared screen, using a whiteboard, anything you can that does brainstorming together so that everybody can see, is going to be very helpful. And here's the really cool thing about this stuff with our technology is that we can record meetings. We're doing it right now. And then we can send it out. And we have now this actual real-time log of all this stuff. So if somebody missed it, or if they need to hear it again, it's recorded and we have it available.
Cool. Some tips for the facilitator. Really check your own bias against silence. Like, we have to get to the place as facilitators where we're willing to be uncomfortable, because there are so many more barriers to people speaking up in a remote call than there is in a live room, right? I mean, in a live room, it's just so much easier to jump in, right? Even there, though, you really need to practice this next practice, which is be comfortable with silence. Ask the question, right? Hey, so what do y'all think about, A, B, and C? Leave it open. Let it just sit there. And then wait longer than you think you should wait and be uncomfortable. And you'll get a response. And then everyone will think, oh, good, we're off the hook because Sally said something. And now you say, good, Sally, thanks. That's really helpful. Let me write that down. Okay, what else? And then wait. And then wait, and then maybe do a small group to have the same question and come back, or whatever you need to do. But ask the question more than once, more than twice. Leave silence, especially in those remote phone calls. People are just, they don't want to interrupt, and you know how easy it is to interrupt, right? We talk over each other all the time. Also, normalize interrupting. And what I mean by that is, hey guys, folks, we're going to interrupt each other. It's a remote meeting. We know it's going to happen, right? More than one person's going to try to speak, and then they'll both stop and it'll feel awkward. Let's just laugh about it, and somebody yields to the other, and then you take turns, and it's okay. I would rather you speak up than not, right?
Yeah. Remember the great awkward, right? So that's part of it, is just embracing awkwardness. And as a facilitator, remember, it is also your job, when there is someone taking up all the airtime, that you gently remind them to let someone else give their input. So yeah, remember that our ability to read the room is, for facilitators, a challenge, but also for participants. I used to always play the game, or I still do, when I'm leading a training. The game is, when I ask a question, and this helps me tolerate the silence, is to guess who's going to speak in the room, because you can actually feel it. There's a shift that happens. People in their way they show up changes. Super hard to do on Zoom. I've tried to make it a game, but Zoom has when people unmute, I'm like, oh, I know they're going to say something, so I can call on them. But a lot of times participants aren't at that level of vigilance in the Zoom room, because they're just defaulted to the facilitator. So it does put some extra on you as a facilitator to call out some of those bad behaviors. And not that this is a bad behavior, but it's, again, someone doing it unconsciously. Just gently remind them, hey, thank you for that. I'm going to give you a pause so I can see if anyone else has any thoughts.
I love it. Here's another trick that's a lot right up the same, in the same ballpark is, let's say I put everyone in small groups to discuss whatever this is. And I said, hey, come up with as many different, answers to this question as you can, come up with as many ideas as you can. Well, now we come back together. Instead of letting one person from each group say all the things, I say, hey, I'm going to have everyone just take a turn. And it's not forced. I mean, they don't have to do that, but rarely do they not. And now everybody has said something. They've all jumped in, they've all participated, and it's just going to make it much more likely the next time that people are going to participate because they broke the ice.
And just shout out to that. It's a wonderful way to create the sense of fairness and inclusion. So I feel included. And that is one of the greatest kind of benefits of this hybrid world and remote. We can very intentionally face our biases and help mitigate them through our behaviors. Yeah. And I think that, again, it is a great awkward. We don't have this all figured out, and we're all learning. And these are just some of the tools and best practices that have been coming up from people who have been doing this for a while, as well as those of us who are just trying it out as we go. And that giving feedback on how our meetings are going is going to be also really crucial for us to continue intentionally engineering these things so they can be effective and enjoyable. And then remember that immediately leaks out into our sense of shared culture together.
Yeah, that's really good. So I just want to capture something you just said. You've been doing, you had the conversation we mentioned earlier about everyone figuring out what do we all need to do and not do to have enjoyable, effective meetings. Let's have a conversation after a couple months in and really get back into it, right? What can I do? What would you like to see me do as the facilitator? Less of or more of? How would you like to change these meetings? What would you do differently if you were running these meetings? These are great small group discussions for that, for that breakout room time. Come back together, tweak things, change things, figure out what you need to do to have even better meetings. And you said this earlier, Hana, but it bears repeating. We really do impact our work culture, the organizational culture, by our meetings. All the things that happen in the real world in our organizations show up right there, right? Respect or lack thereof, how we make decisions, fairness, involvement, culture, inclusion. I mean, everything that matters almost shows up right there in meetings, right? So we can improve these meetings. We can improve the broader culture. So talk about this with your people, talk about this with your group, and design great meetings.
And, just that little closure here on culture. Culture was never our buildings. And physical space does matter. Not saying that it doesn't, but one of the greatest ways that we create our culture is just through our shared everyday habits. And it's exactly all the things that you just said. How I listen, how do I give and receive feedback, and how do we make decisions? All of these things that we really do incorporate in these 15 best practice management skills. This is what defines our culture. So being able to really focus on those, ratchet them up to 11 is a great way to improve our culture and intentionally engineer it. And when we talk about relatedness, okay, well, how do I actually get people to connect? Well, you're doing it, right? Like, just know that you're actually doing it by doing these great meetings, doing your check-ins, giving people autonomy about how to do their jobs, helping them know what great looks like, letting them know that you care by giving them time for self-care. You're already doing it. If you want a little bit more here, relatedness is, again, part of those SCARF things. Number one way to increase a sense of relatedness within a group is by having a shared sense of goals. And the second one down, the sense of relatedness is through shared experience. And lastly, actually, is shared time. I think we kind of put those in different orders. Like, we tend to think time, I need quality time. We need to be together. We need to be doing these things. Actually, just by naming your goal, your intention for the meeting, or having the group say the meeting goal or intention, you have now created a really powerful sense of belonging for everybody in that meeting. Shared experience, we've given some examples, check-in icebreakers. People were doing all kinds of little funny things. 2020 was trivia nights. This is just maybe as getting together for a lunch over Zoom this isn't a meeting, it's just actually to hang out and chat. There's lots of ways to still create a sense of connectedness using these platforms. I don't know about you, Mike, but the ability to call up best friends and do FaceTime or do Zoom in today's world is something I really look forward to, because I can't drive over the mountains and go see them, or we're actually more accessible. We just have to be more intentional.
Right. That's a great way to kind of wrap up is back to what you say, culture is not the building as much, right? It's the goals, shared experiences. You can do that in meetings. Like you said, you absolutely can get on the same page, set some goals, figure out what we're about. I also want to just say, and I think we mentioned this last time, so much of this stands or falls on the skills of the facilitator. And I just want to do another shout out to that. I mean, it is really important that facilitators have some facilitation skills. I mean, there's so many moving parts to running a meeting, so many things you have to be thinking about, from all the way from setting it up to communicating it, to facilitating it, to dealing with the issues and the problems that might come up, to following up. It's so many things. So I just want to shout out where, learning how to facilitate a good meeting is going to be probably 80% of what makes a great meeting. And I actually happen to know a company that can come in and help people learn how to facilitate meetings. Look us up, nashconsulting.com. But yeah, this is great stuff. Hana, thank you so much. This has been really, really fun to spend these last couple of sessions with you talking through these things.
Yeah, and I want to give a little I guess, invitation to our listeners. This, like I said, we're in the trenches with you. We're really trying to dig into the data and research emerging. And you guys are you're the ones in the field. You're the ones doing this stuff. And if you have any thoughts, ideas, icebreakers, game, like what are you doing that's been successful? Or, actually also we love, what's your biggest mistake? Like, did you forget to wear pants one day and then stand up and try to go get your coffee? I mean, this is the stuff we got to embrace too, right? What's been going well for you and your team? What have you found to be really successful to create a sense of connection, but also intentionally engineer your culture? And then, what's not worked very well? What did you try and didn't go so well? If you feel like it, send us an email. Please send it to contact@nashconsulting.com. And we really look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, see you later.
Bye.